Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 bringing to you another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. And June 23rd, 2003 marks 20 years ago that Kane unmasked for the first time and showed his face to the entire world. And for today's edition, I am going to be talking about the success and failures of Kane Unmasked. So, since Kane made his debut in October 1997 at the In Your House Bad Blood pay-per-view, Kane has always been shrouded in mystery. He was always portrayed as a man of no words, mostly silent, and would destroy anything, anyone, and everything in his path with no remorse whatsoever. And there was always a lot of speculation and intrigue about what Kane looked like underneath the mask. We was always told for many years that Kane was burned in a fire as a child. And over the course of Kane's career, we would see several wrestlers unmask Kane. In 2000, DX unmasked Kane, but we never actually saw his face. At SummerSlam 2000, The Undertaker unmasked Kane after a bloody brawl, but we never saw his face. In 2002, the NWO unmasked Kane, but we never saw his face. Kane would return with a new mask, which would show the bottom part of his mouth, so he was now able to talk properly, but ultimately we still never saw his face. And in early 2003, after an Evolution beatdown, Batista would unmask Kane, but we would still not see his face. Now, during all of these occasions, whenever someone would unmask Kane, his hair would always cover his face, and he would run away, trying to make sure that no one would actually see what he really looked like. So that really just fueled fans' intrigue and the speculation. Well, what does he really look like? Is he really burned under there? What's his face look like? So on the June 16th, 2003 edition of Raw, Triple H came out and offered Kane an opportunity to join Evolution. Stone Cold came out, who was the co-Raw GM at the time, and presented Kane with an offer of his own. He basically said to Kane, you can take Triple H's offer and join Evolution, or you can take my offer, a world title match against Triple H. So after a heated exchange, Raw co-GM Eric Bischoff came out and added a very unique stipulation. If Kane was unable to win the world title, he would have to unmask. Now, this is where I had an issue with this scenario. Bear in mind that this was 20 years ago when this all took place. If you're going to have a situation that culminates in a moment where Kane unmasks and shows his face for the first time ever, it should have had a bigger and longer, more drawn out build up, and it should have been made into a huge deal, and it should have culminated at a pay-per-view, maybe at a SummerSlam or at a Raw pay-per-view. All throughout the build up, you could have showed those moments where Kane was unmasked by different wrestlers, to really add to that fuel that could Kane actually lose his mask at this pay-per-view. Or better yet, I'll go one better. What about the pay-per-view where Kane made his debut? Bad Blood. Think about it. Kane made his debut at Bad Blood in 1987. Fast forward to 2003, Kane loses his mask, bringing everything full circle. The story writes itself. That's what should have happened. There was no build-up to Kane possibly unmasking. It was, you're challenging for the world title. If you lose, you take off your mask. Done. Not really much of a build-up. And it was on a Raw. This should have happened at a pay-per-view. I guarantee you, more people would have tuned into the pay-per-view just to see Kane possibly win the world title or unmask. That's what should have happened. My best friend taped Raw on VHS. We watched it together. We both wanted Kane to win the world title. We were strongly against the idea of Kane unmasking. It was a huge part of the character, and we felt that if he took off the mask, it would have just killed it. Oh boy, that's aged very well. So, after interference from Evolution and after two pedigrees, Triple H retained the world title, and Kane, as agreement to the stipulation, unmasked. Now, when he unmasked, JR and the King hyped it up, saying things like, "Oh my god, look at that face. It looks so hideous. Oh, it's disfigured." Looking back at it, it looks stupid. Kane's face wasn't even burned, it was covered in dirt and had smudged makeup, and half of his hair was shaved off. You know, it looked okay, I suppose, but it didn't look that scary when you look back at it. He just looked kind of goofy. But the initial weeks after Kane unmasked were excellent. He came out the following week, delivered a chokeslam to Eric Bischoff off the stage, got into an epic brawl with Stone Cold, and Stone Cold busted him open with a steel chair. And that moment brought back some flashes of their epic brawls from 1988 during the Attitude Era. And then he set JR on fire, and then he tombstoned Linda McMahon on the top of the steel stage, and then he tombstoned Shane McMahon on the steel steps. You know, he done some pretty horrific and violent things, Kane. And the interesting thing about this Kane was it was the monster of old, but with an added twist. Unlike the original incarnation of Kane, where he didn't talk, he just basically destroyed anything and everything in his path, this Kane was sadistic, very evil, very calculating, and enjoyed hurting people. He got a real kick out of it, and you saw him laugh a lot. So that was an interesting twist to the Kane character. He had an evil personality, and he had some really good matches. He had a fantastic no holds barred match at SummerSlam 2003 against Rob Van Dam, and they had a great rematch the following month in a steel cage match on Raw, which I thought was really good. And he had two excellent back to back matches with Shane McMahon, the Last Man Standing match at Unforgiven, which was really good, and the ambulance match at Survivor Series 2003, which was really good as well. I probably enjoyed the ambulance match just a little bit more than the Last Man Standing match, mainly because the ambulance match had a very unique stipulation. First person to throw their opponent into the ambulance wins the match. So I thought that was a very unique, interesting concept. And Kane really kicked ass after he took off the mask. You know, nobody wanted to be in the same room or building when this guy showed up. And the entrance he had, where he was accompanied by police officers and he was all in shackles and chains, that to me was an amazing entrance. And he had the black towel as well. He really looked like something out of a horror movie. You know, this guy looked like he just come out of prison or an asylum, and he was just going to be unleashed on his poor opponents in the ring. So some really good stuff here, and his promos are really good as well. You know, he's very underrated as a talker on the mic. You know, he's very good at telling stories with his words, and his execution is top notch. You know, very few people can talk on the mic in that manner and keep your attention. It's only a small handful of guys who can do that. Guys like The Undertaker and Jake Roberts, you know, more psychological storytellers. You know, they make you pay attention to their words. You know, obviously The Rock is king of the mic, but that's more of his witty tongue. But with Kane, he was more to draw you in with his words, so you really had to listen to what he had to say. I feel that Kane, during the height of his dominance, should have been world champion. I was pretty much burned out with Triple H hogging the world title all the time. I was ready for a change. I think after Triple H and Goldberg got their business done, I think Kane should have been the next opponent. Him and Goldberg could have had a really good rivalry, and maybe Kane beats Goldberg for the world title at Armageddon 2003. And he also buried The Undertaker alive. You knew those two were going to cross paths again eventually. And this is where things start to go downhill. After kicking ass against RVD and Shane McMahon, and just basically just owning everybody on Raw, he started to be portrayed as more of a coward. He did carry the build up for the Return of the Dead Man. Got to give him his dues. He carried the whole build up by himself without his opponent being on TV once. But at the same time, they made Kane look really silly. He looked more of a coward. My Kane is not a coward. He's fearless, he's scared of no one, and he will hurt anyone who gets in his way. That's the Kane I know. This Kane, he was scared, he just pretty much unraveled, and by the time it got to WrestleMania 20, he was basically in tears saying, "You're not real, I buried you alive." Not one of the high points of Kane's post unmasked career. And of course, by this point, he'd already changed his look. He ditched the vest / tank top. He had a topless look and new tights and boots. Wasn't a fan of that look. He really got out of shape. He just didn't look good. I would have been inclined to maybe keep the vest / tank top, maybe go with a new design, because I really felt that was more closer to the original Kane, or at least one of those incarnations. And, Kane, who was always known as very agile and quick for a guy his size, he got very slow and lazy in the ring, and his matches were not that good to watch. Yeah, things started to really go downhill by this point. I felt that from June 2003 to March 2004, he kicked ass and experienced some initial success. He was a big part of the show, got involved in some great rivalries and some great feuds, and he had some unbelievable matches. But after that, everything started going downhill. He got involved in some very questionable and stupid storylines, like, for example, forcing Lita to marry him. He's coming out in a white suit, which was stupid. Getting Lita pregnant, which was silly. The feud with Snitsky wasn't bad. I thought it was pretty decent. Bit on the silly side, but their matches were pretty decent to watch. But yeah, people give a lot of stick to The Undertaker that he turned his back on his roots when he became the biker and he brought his wife Sarah on TV. Yeah, I weren't a fan of that stuff, but unlike Kane, Undertaker always maintained a high level of serious integrity. You never saw Undertaker cry. You never saw him as a pathetic, cowardly heel. He did portray a cowardly heel at times, but ultimately he would never back down. He would still kick ass. But with Kane, he just became more and more humanized, and he broke down in tears when Lita ditched him for Edge. Wasn't a fan. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. And then you get to the imposter Kane stuff. Mind games were excellent. The match itself at Vengeance 2006, terrible. Absolutely terrible. Once Kane got rid of the imposter, got his mask back when he said, "I believe this belongs to me," that should have been the moment Kane put the mask back on. Should have taken some time off, got himself back in proper shape, and returned with the hair and new attire and back to his roots. That didn't happen. He would win the tag team titles on 2 occasions with the Big Show. Yeah, it was okay, but it would have been much more special if they won the tag team titles earlier, maybe during the Attitude Era when both were at their height as unstoppable giants. It just wasn't that good. And then you had the whole May 19th thing, was just even more stupid. And teaming up with The Undertaker as the Brothers of Destruction, that was fun. I never get tired of seeing Kane and Undertaker together. It was a bit odd, especially as Kane was now unmasked, so it was a bit strange seeing that, but it was still good fun. But at the same time, yeah, the whole unmasked thing with Kane went on for way too long. And then fast forward to WrestleMania 24, when he beat Chavo Guerrero for the ECW World title. For me, this was an absolute slap in the face. You know, for a hard worker like Kane, who'd been in the company by that point for 10 and a half years, and you're giving him the ECW World title? No thanks. Kane deserved so much more. He deserved a lot better. And then after that, he would just kind of coast along, really. He didn't really do a lot, you know. He just kind of jobbed out to a lot of guys. You know, he would still dominate the Royal Rumble like he did every year, but he never won the Royal Rumble. He should have done. And yeah, it just wasn't a good time. You know, as a fan of Kane, there were more low points than there were high ones. But fast forward to 2010, he picked himself up again. You know, he had the whole Undertaker vegetative state storyline, and Kane really came into his own. You know, he started delivering these unbelievable promos with the dark red lights, and he had the creepy, evil music playing in the background. For me, that was probably Kane's best work on the mic during his post unmasked career. And then he would go on to win the world title in July at Money in the Bank, cashed in on the same night and defeated Rey Mysterio. And Kane would go on to hold the world title from July 2010 to December 2010. And that will be talked about for a future edition for another time. So make sure you don't miss that. And then ultimately, in the end, Kane would get taken out in 2011 by Mark Henry, thus returning at the end of the year with the mask and new attire, which will also be talked about on a future edition of this series. So, in terms of the success and failures of Kane Unmasked, started off with some initial great success, but ultimately I'm going to call this a complete failure. And it's pretty sad to say that as a huge fan of Kane, that Kane is a failure. He's not, but the whole unmasked thing was a complete failure because Kane, 1 minute was a face, then he was a heel, then he was a tweener. He had as much turns as the Big Show. Even though the Big Show still holds the crown for that, Kane wasn't that far behind. I just got the impression with WWE, they didn't really know what to do with Kane. It was just like they'll just put him in an angle, he'll job out to a guy, and then just move on to the next one. It just did more harm than good, but I won't lie, there were some good things that came out of Kane's post unmasked career. He did win the tag team titles twice, he did win the world title, he did win the Money in the Bank contract, delivered some unbelievable promos, his storytelling skills were top notch, but ultimately, yes, I wasn't a fan of Kane Unmasked. I think he should have kept the mask, in my honest opinion. But it is what it is. But as I said, Kane Unmasked, a complete failure. And it's hard to believe that it was 20 years ago that Kane actually took off his mask for the first time. It's crazy. I was 16 years old when I watched Kane take off his mask for the first time with my best friend. Time has really flown by so fast. It's unbelievable. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What was your thoughts on the unmasking of Kane? Did you enjoy it? Did you think it was a good thing? Do you think it was a bad thing? Do you deem it a success or do you deem it a complete failure? What was your favourite moment during the post unmasked career of Kane? Do you have a favourite match involving Kane? Do you think Kane should have kept the mask on? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. And I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Wrestling Discussion Series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.